When Val Kilmer died, everyone was shocked, but fans weren't ready for what they found out later. Many people in Hollywood were sad about the death of one of their biggest stars, Val Kilmer. The autopsy report got out. There were shocking and upsetting facts inside that made everyone wonder what really happened in his last days. This isn't the news story you read. What you thought you knew about Val Kilmer's last days was wrong. There was a truth behind the praise and movie montages. You won't believe what happens in that story. Val Kilmer died suddenly on April 1, 2025, which made everyone in Hollywood sad. The news shocked people all over the world, including those in Hollywood. Val Kilmer passed away at the age of 65. He was a well-known actor who did lead roles in Top Gun, Batman Forever, and The Doors. From what the official statement said, pneumonia symptoms were to blame. A lot of people shared the story on social media and friends sent their condolences, but the story felt unfinished in some way. The awards started to come in almost right away. Kilmer worked with director Michael Mann on the movie. Mann said that Kilmer was a smart, surprising force that made every scene he was in different. Josh Brolin wrote in a letter, "See you, pal. I'm going to miss you. You were a brave, creative firecracker." Several actors, directors, and singers talked about how sad they were about Val Kilmer's death. A lot of people loved him. On their official Top Gun account, they said, "Val Kilmer, you'll be missed. A legend on and off screen." A black and white picture of Kilmer as Doc Holliday in Tombstone was shared on Slash. And the director of the movie, Francis Ford Coppola, said that Kilmer was a natural talent that got better with age. Each letter had the same tone: shock, sadness, and a sense that the death happened too soon. Some texts were long and some were short. Even so, there were whispers going on behind the flowers, comments and news stories. Val Kilmer had been sick for a long time. He battled throat cancer for a long time in public. He finally told everyone in 2017 after years of reports and being turned down. Fans saw him lose his voice, have trouble breathing, and disappear from public view, but he had one last great performance in Top Gun Maverick. But when he came back to the screen with the help of voice AI and creative shooting, a lot of people knew it was time for him to go. Still, when most people heard the news, they thought that the damage from his cancer treatment was what killed him. It wasn't a surprise that the body that was already weak got pneumonia. There was something next that caught everyone by surprise. As the date of Kilmer's death got closer, honors kept coming in and the media kept showing reels of his best work. But a different conversation started behind closed doors. Some of his close friends, family, and even old co-workers told him they didn't know how bad things were. There were signs that Val Kilmer was becoming less close to people in the months before he died. He ignored calls, turned down guests, and turned down offers of help. Soon after, his friends started to wonder why he hadn't been seen in public for months. People said he had been to the hospital several times in the past year, but it never made the news. Also, why did it take so long to share the full autopsy report when pneumonia was thought to have been the cause of death? At first, it was easy for these questions to get lost in all the other work, but some writers kept at them. There were reports that the autopsy revealed very upsetting information that no one had expected. There were signs that Kilmer's last days were even worse than everyone thought. But everyone was sad right now. Fans watched their favorite Val Kilmer movies again. And on social media, there were old interviews, movie clips, and pictures of Kilmer looking happy when he was at his best. There was a quiet sense of worry, even though everyone was sad. The news stories said that he had died, but the real story was still to be found in the fine print of his last medical report. Everyone was shocked when it came to the surface. The rise of Val Kilmer to fame and mystery in Hollywood. Val Kilmer was different before the funeral, the accolades, and the questions about what the autopsy showed. He was a big deal in Hollywood. Few people could light up the screen and hide behind a character like he could. People talked about him, caused trouble, and were interested in him long before he died. It was simple and quick to remember. How Val Kilmer rose, he was born in California in 1959 and grew up there. He was young when he became interested in art. At that point, he was the youngest person to ever get into the elite acting school at Juilliard. After that, Hollywood called not long after. It was top secret that gave him his big break as a comedy in 1984 that showed he could be both funny and crazy at the same time. That movie, Top Gun, which came out in 1986, changed his life. Kilmer played Tom Iceman Kazansky, their cool and cocky foe, and he stole many scenes from Tom Cruise. In some way, he became the story's main character. After that, his job went through the roof. When he played Jim Morrison in The Doors, even Morrison's friends were shocked. And when he played Doc Holliday in Tombstone, his role as the Southern Shooter became famous. In Batman Forever, one of the most popular movies of the 1990s, he played Batman. Even though there were some problems with that job, as Val Kilmer's fame grew, he was said to be hard to get along with. There were rumors about movie sets going around. Directors said he was unreliable, hard to work with, and even aggressive. On the crazy set of The Island of Dr. Moreau, Kilmer got into so many fights with the actors and crew that one director quit. Director Joel Schumacher said he was psychologically troubled and the hardest character he'd ever worked with in Batman Forever. Once these claims were made, Kilmer said they were not true because he was a professional who wanted to give his all on stage and wasn't afraid to say what he thought. But the damage to his reputation didn't go away. He stopped being as bankable and well-known in the early 2000s, and he slowly moved away from the center of Hollywood. But Kilmer had a charm that made people want to know more about him. He kept getting hired, and fans kept watching, even after the news said he was moody. It looked like a man was fighting something much bigger than the parts he played behind the scenes. Then they got sick. Around 2014, it was said that Kilmer's health was getting worse, but he never said anything about it. Not a single person talked about how much weight he had lost, his rough voice, or the public events he had to cancel. For years, he said he had cancer, even though his friends and fans knew something wasn't right. Kilmer finally didn't say it again in 2017. He was beating throat cancer, but no one knew while he went through chemotherapy, radiation, and finally surgery to remove his voice. When he finally talked about it, he was honest, which fans liked. When he went out in public again, he was weak but happy, and people praised his strength. They saw his return in Top Gun Maverick as Iceman as a win and a chance to make up for lost time. Anyway, Kilmer hid a lot of things from everyone. You saw this more and more as you look back on his life. She did have a lot of famous roles, but behind the scenes, there were years of stress, silence, and lies about what was really going on. That wasn't just during his job. Even his closest family and friends didn't know that he would always have to hide to keep his privacy. I mean, it wasn't just when he was sick or at work. He would remember it all the way to the end. There was a sad part of his story that would not be in the news or interviews. It would depend on what was discovered after he died. Having a fight alone. Kilmer fought cancer without saying a word. People saw only the best of Val Kilmer's life for years. He smiled in interviews, walked the red carpet, and was in hit pictures. Kilmer was fighting a war that no one saw or heard about behind closed doors. It cost him almost everything by the time everyone found out about it. It started behind closed doors around 2014. People who liked him started to notice that he wasn't the same. He seemed weaker and less fat. His voice was rough and hoarse when he was out in public. Things were called off. He was said to be in the hospital, and shots of him that seemed weak were not clear. People said he was really sick, but every time the press asked, Kilmer denied it. He told everyone he was okay, even though it was clear he wasn't. In 2017, the truth came out. This is what Kilmer told The Hollywood Reporter, which a lot of people already knew. He was told he had cancer of the throat. In the last 3 years, he had radiation, chemotherapy, and a tracheotomy, all of which changed the way he could speak forever. Kilmer would always play things down, like when he joked about his weak voice and said he was fine. The story was more complicated than that, though. They took away almost everything else, but they kept him alive. In movies like The Doors and Tombstone, you could hear his once strong voice. Now it was just a weak whisper. It was hard for him to breathe and eat because he was sick. He couldn't do the work he usually did. This was hell for a man who had been in movies for decades. Kilmer didn't want to be liked, though. He tried to change the story instead. He made a very personal movie called Val that came out in 2021. His kids helped him make it. Voiceovers and home movies from over the years were used to tell his story from his childhood to his rise in Hollywood to his battle with cancer. It was honest and real, and it was hard to watch at times. The star wasn't what people saw. They saw the weak man behind the fame. Many fans felt free when they read Val. It gave them a chance to finally understand the man who had been hidden for so long behind characters and news stories. However, the film did not cover all of it. Kilmer told a lot of people about his illness, but he kept some parts of his story to himself. His friends, family, and even doctors said they didn't fully understand those parts. The main story said that he had beaten cancer. No longer sick, he was living a quiet life in Los Angeles with his family, his art, and some small projects he did by himself. But the people who knew him best knew that just because he was better didn't mean he was safe. Because they cut his throat, he was always at risk. His defenses were weak, so it was hard for him to breathe, eat, and talk every day. In addition to the bodily damage, there were signs of something deeper going on emotionally. He was lonely, pulling away, and becoming less willing to let anyone into his world. The Val Kilmer that people remembered was different. In the background, his health kept getting worse. Even though there were stories about him making a comeback, even the people he cared about most agreed that he wasn't calling out to them in the last few months. He didn't need help. It was impossible for anyone to see how bad things had become. Everyone thought Kilmer's fight was over when he beat cancer. Many people, even those close to him, didn't know that the fight had left him with scars that were deeper than anyone knew. There were some very strange and scary ways those scars came back. Fans who grew up seeing Val Kilmer rule the big screen thought that his return in Top Gun: Maverick was like a moment that had been frozen in time. It was 2022, almost 40 years after the movie that made him famous. Once more, he was there. Tom Iskanansky was standing next to Tom Cruise's character Maverick. But this time, beneath the cool surface, there was something different and weak. Everyone knew Kilmer's voice would never be the same after Maverick came out. His battle with throat cancer was no longer a secret. A lot of people didn't know how tough it was to get him back on TV. The writers, Cruise, and Kilmer himself all worked very hard to make it happen. Kilmer was getting worse, and it was hard for him to talk. Sometimes it was hard for him to do easy scenes, but he did them for himself and the people. He could finish a story about a person who had been important to his work in many ways. The artist used a lot of different styles to bring Iceman back to life. In the story, someone called Iceman often texted or typed to talk to other people. When he did speak, it was just a few simple words. That being said, those few lines were still important because Kilmer said them himself, not just Iceman. People didn't just hear his real voice in that scene. They heard a mix of his real words and cutting-edge AI voice technology. An IT business was hired by Kilmer to turn old records into digital copies of his voice. It was enough to make everyone remember the voice. People were shocked when the movie first came out. It made moviegoers cry all over the world, and critics said it was one of the most moving parts of the movie. What the words meant, a man who had lost everything coming back for one last bow, was what mattered. Things were not done as well off-screen, though. Afterward, the people who made the movie said it was really tough. Kilmer didn't look good. Every day on set was hard. Scenes were planned out so he didn't have to talk or move around a lot. When the camera stopped rolling, Kilmer would leave in silence. He was tired. It was clear that Kilmer was becoming less well known after the movie came out. He did a few interviews in public events. Most of the time, he drew and wrote at home with his kids and close friends. Most people thought they saw make a successful return, also known as a comeback. Most people didn't get that scene with Maverick's real message, which was that it wasn't a comeback, but a goodbye. Kilmer's part in Maverick was a well-thought-out send-off in many ways. That was the end for the crowd, but he was already leaving behind. His health was getting worse faster than anyone thought. Fans were glad that Iceman was back, but Kilmer quietly stopped being in public again. A lot of people's hearts broke when they saw that, but that wasn't the whole story. People who saw that movie had no idea that Kilmer's real last act would not be shown in theaters. It would come out in a report that no one was ready to read months after he had died. It was about his family, his fame, his loneliness, and his personal life. Val Kilmer had a lot of fame, led big movies, and played well-known roles, but he rarely talked about his personal life. For decades, people knew who he was behind the camera, but not much else. The story got weirder over time. Kilmer's love life was full of hard times, just like a lot of his work. In 1988, when he was very famous, he married the British actress Joanne Whalley. They met on the set of Willow. That scene looked like something out of a Hollywood fairy tale. They were young, smart, and pretty. They had 2 kids together. Jeep was born in 1991, and Jack was born in 1995. But behind the scenes, the worry of being famous and having personal issues got to them. By 1996, they were no longer married and had broken up in secret. Kilmer spent most of his time with his kids. He often talked about them as the thing that made him happiest. In his documentary, Val, they were shown, and it was clear that after years of ups and downs in Hollywood, they had become his rock. While Kilmer got along well with his kids, he had trouble getting along with other people. He was linked to several famous women over the years, including Cindy Crawford, Daryl Hannah, and even Angelina Jolie while Alexander was being shot. The tabloids loved the stories, but Kilmer never recognized or talked about these connections. He kept his private life to himself. That much was clear. As he aged, that safety changed into something else, being by himself. When Kilmer found out he had cancer, his whole world changed. He stayed out of public life because of both physical and mental health issues. Friends and family of his saw that he wasn't letting them in like he used to. No one answered the invites. No one picked up the calls. A lot of the time, he was by himself at home in Los Angeles with his art, journals, and memories close by. Some of what they said made sense. The treatments for his cancer had worn him out mentally and physically. His voice was very soft, and his body was weak. Putting on public shows was hard work. But Kilmer didn't seem to be himself when he was by himself. He said in his own words that he was very spiritual and believed in riddles, signs, and the bigger picture of life. But he was very protective of his place because he thought that he wasn't trying to make people feel sorry for him. He didn't want to seem weak, but the need to protect cost something. In the year before he died, Kilmer's friends said it became harder to get in touch with him. He wasn't getting messages back. He stayed away from groups. His family members said they hadn't seen him in a while before he died. It looked like a man was living alone and getting better after being sick from the outside. Things were getting worse for the people who knew him best, though. Was he really having a bad time? Was he trying to hide something? Or were all the fights he had to go through, first in Hollywood and then with his health, too much for him? When his friends and family heard the news of his death, they were sad but not completely shocked. The growing quiet and the damage to their bodies told them things were getting worse. What the formal report about his death would say was something they hadn't seen and couldn't guess. No one saw coming the truth that made Kilmer's last months much scarier, even though there were lots of praise and news stories about him. After the truth came out, even people who were close to Val Kilmer started to question how well they really knew him. Not so nice facts. After Val Kilmer's death, everyone went on with their lives. His movies were streamed, his talks were watched again, and he was remembered as Iceman. It looked like the story was over. A famous person who was loved by many died too soon after having health problems for years. Then came Val Kilmer's autopsy report, which no one thought would get so much attention. Everything that was seen at first showed what everyone already knew: pneumonia in a body that was already weak. The study had some details tucked away that made the picture much scarier. Everything shocked people except the cause of death. The coroner's report said that Kilmer showed signs of being very hungry in his last few months. He was a lot lighter than someone his age and height should have been. There were clear signs of muscle loss, which doctors said is common in people who are dying, but was happening a lot faster in this case. It made me wonder if he had forgotten to eat. Had he given up? But that wasn't all. He was also said to have had a few small infections that were not treated. His immune system was already weak, and these infections were not handled for long enough. It would have been easy to treat these infections if they had been found earlier, the study says. Kilmer either hadn't seen or hadn't told anyone. Scarier were the notes about long-term surgical wounds that hadn't fully healed. Some of these wounds were from cancer surgeries in the past. It looked like the person had been abused and stressed for a long time. In the months before he died, it was clear that he needed help, but he stayed home and didn't go to the doctor, according to the story. The next results were the poisonous ones. His report showed that he had a lot of prescription painkillers in his body, not enough to kill him, but enough to show that he had been in a lot of pain, that it wasn't being managed. Val Kilmer's formal story about the last few months is both sad and interesting. It shows how complicated personal pain can be. Some people hide their pain so well that not even their closest family and friends can see it. This might be because they are proud or want to keep things private. These parts aren't just about avoiding sadness or grief. They show a deep fear of being weak, of being seen as a burden, or of not being seen as the strong, tough person one used to be. It's possible that Kilmer's need to control the story of his life and keep up a front of independence, even though the truth was much more fragile, hurt his cause. He could be afraid of telling himself or other people how much pain he was in. That could be because of how they feel or think. As a public figure, he may feel this way because he has to always look strong, capable, and in charge. It could also be because he wants to protect the people around him. He might not have let his family and friends see how badly he was hurt, so they wouldn't have to see him that weak. People often hide their pain because they feel it's too close to home or too raw to talk about. For someone who has lived their whole life in the middle, it could be because they are afraid of being judged or feel weak, which is a shame. It looks like Kilmer did what he did because he was proud, wanted to be alone, and maybe felt mentally worn out. He may have thought that hiding his pain was the only way to somehow stay in charge of his life after years of dealing with his health. And in Hollywood, for many, this part of his story hits close to home because it shows how people hide their pain and choose to carry it alone, even if it means they break down in public. People can hide their problems very well, even if they are close to you. This really makes you think about how important it is to check on people you care about, even if they seem fine at first look.